This week marked the 42nd anniversary of the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision that made abortion legal in the U.S. Tonight, a panel of guests will examine the right to life from various angles. Why did a pro-life bill go down in flames on Capitol Hill while another passed? Co-chairs of the Congressional Pro-Life Caucus, Representatives Chris Smith and Dan Lipinski, will tell us. Later, President of Heartbeat International, Peggy Hartshorn, discusses the impact crisis pregnancy centers are having around the globe. And why is Louisiana the most pro-life state in the Union? Vice President of the Bioethics Defense Fund, Dorinda Bordlee, will tell us. And what to make of those papal rabbit comments. Director of Education at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, Father TAD PACHOLCZYK, will discuss that and more. The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. As hundreds of thousands of marchers conclude their March for Life here in Washington, we'll welcome Congressman Chris Smith and Dan Lipinski, Peggy Hartshorn, Dorinda Bordlee, and Father TAD PACHOLCZYK. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. I'll be live tweeting throughout the show, or drop us an email, worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get started. Lots to share with you. Here's the brief. News from the world over this week. Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah died at the age of 90. His death was announced on Saudi state TV, and the stage appears to be set for a complex transition of power. Abdullah's half-brother, Prince Salman, will be his successor. Now, Salman himself is 79 years old and appears to be in poor health, possibly suffering from dementia. We'll continue to watch this story. His comments have circled the globe and replicated like, well, rabbits. During an in-flight press conference en route to Rome, Pope Francis addressed a question about overpopulation, poverty, and the Church's position on artificial contraception. As part of his answer, reaffirming Church opposition to artificial birth control, the Holy Father stressed responsible parenthood, underscoring that some think, quote, to be good Catholics, they must be like rabbits, end quote. He went on to offer an example of irresponsible parenting, a woman whom he admonished for being pregnant again after having 7 C-sections. He said to her, "Do you want to leave 7 orphans? That is to tempt God." On Wednesday, during his general audience in Rome, the Pope tried to reframe those comments. He said he found in the Philippines much consolation and hope seeing so many large families who welcome each child as a gift of God. And they realize that every child is a blessing. He also rejected the notion that overpopulation is a cause of poverty. More about this later in the show. On his return flight from the Philippines, the Pope also confirmed his travel plans for his U.S. visit. In September, he'll be stopping in Philadelphia, New York, and right here in Washington, D.C. California is apparently out, he said, due to time constraints. A South American trip is also in the works this year for Ecuador, Bolivia, and Paraguay. Pope Francis wrapped up his Philippine visit on Sunday, celebrating Mass for a record crowd of 6 million faithful in attendance. And there is fallout from the latest issue of Charlie Hebdo. It's hit Niger and Christians there. This past weekend, Muslim protesters killed at least 10 people and set fire to 45 church structures after the release of the French satirical magazine's latest cover featuring the Prophet Muhammad. Muslim teaching forbids any depiction or image of Muhammad or God. Pope Francis on Wednesday offered his prayers for the victims in Niger. He again decried the waging of war in the name of God and prayed that religious sentiment would never give rise to violence, oppression, and destruction. Researchers in Denmark have discovered a link between the birth control pill and cancer. According to a study published in the British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology, women who suffer from a specific type of brain cancer are almost twice as likely to have taken hormonal contraceptives on a regular basis, whether via the pill, the patch, or other methods. The risk also appears to increase with the longevity of use. The study is preliminary. Doctors say the correlation warrants further research. 2 days of high-level talks between Cuba and the United States concluded in Havana on Thursday as the nations move to normalize relations. Migration remains a sticking point. The Castro regime objects to American policy allowing Cuban nationals to apply for residency should they reach U.S. shores. Cubans intercepted in the Florida Straits by the Coast Guard are returned to Cuba. Even though the communist-ruled nation forbids emigration off the island, as many as 45,000 Cubans end up in the United States annually. During a State of the Union address, the president urged Congress to end the 50-year trade embargo against Cuba and offered a nod to Pope Francis, who's credited with jump-starting the diplomatic effort.
As His Holiness Pope Francis has said, diplomacy is the work of small steps. These small steps have added up to new hope for the future in Cuba.
And a mixed bag at the High Court in 2 religious freedom cases. A unanimous Supreme Court ruled Tuesday that a Muslim prison inmate in Arkansas can grow a short beard for religious purposes. Also at the High Court, they declined to hear an appeal of a ruling that would force a Catholic priest to disclose what was discussed during a confession or face prison. Last May, the Louisiana Supreme Court ruled that if a penitent waives the right to confidentiality, then there is no privileged seal of confession. The case involved an adult man who purportedly molested a girl. The man has since died, but the parents of the girl said she had mentioned the man's actions during confession. They alleged that the priest advised her not to report the incident. Louisiana law requires mandatory reporting of sexual assaults of minors. The Diocese of Baton Rouge objected to at the time, saying the court ruling was a clear and unfettered violation of the Establishment Clause. When we return, Congressman Dan Lipinski and Chris Smith join us. What happened to that pro-life piece of legislation that was withdrawn from consideration at the Capitol? And they'll react to the President's State of the Union address. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My first guests tonight are members of the U.S. House of Representatives from each side of the aisle. They're also co-chairs of the Congressional Pro-Life Caucus, here to discuss the 42nd anniversary of Roe v. Wade and the congressional shelving of a pro-life bill and this week's State of the Union. Please welcome Republican Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey and Democratic Congressman Dan Lipinski of Illinois. Thank you both for being here. Pleasure to see you here.
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Let's start with this bill. There was a much ballyhooed bill. It had been talked about for a good long time now. On the day of the Roe v. Wade commemoration, this Pain-Capable Child Protection Act was to come out. 64% of the voters have been polled. They support this. 64%. Even Democrats split 46 to 47 on this. So there's a lot of support out there. Why was it shelved? And who is Renee Elmers? Congressman Smith.
Well, it's been shelved, but it's a very temporary bump in the road. We have an absolute commitment from the Republican leadership. Kevin McCarthy is the majority leader, a very pro-life man and a very committed and effective majority leader. He has said, we're going to bring it up. We're going to work out some language bumps that we ran into. But I can assure you, and I've been in Congress 35 years, pro-life movement 42 years, this legislation is coming forward, and Daniel and I and all of us will be on the floor, and we will be helping to expose this horrific reality that unborn children at 20 weeks gestation, post-fertilization age, suffer horrific pain, pain that is more egregious than those suffered by newborns or 5-year-olds or 10-year-olds. And in the vote and debate we had on the rule, before we substituted, or the leadership substituted, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act, the pro-abortion lawmakers were in absolute denial that these children feel pain. One member even said there's no evidence that these children feel pain, even though now anytime someone unborn child gets prenatal surgery or a blood transfusion or something where there's an intervention surgically at a certain age, at least at 20 weeks, they're getting anesthesia because they feel pain.
Yeah.
So that debate will happen. We had a magnificent win on the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act, co-sponsored by my
I want to get to that in a minute. I want to stay on this bill for a moment, Bill. And this would have stopped any late-term abortion, really, after 20 weeks. 20 weeks was the cutoff. It seems the issue here, there was a group of, they say GOP women is being largely reported, led by Renee Elmers, and her concern was the reporting in the bill. It requires people to report rapes to the authorities. Why is that a problem?
Well, you're gonna have to ask Renee and the other representatives who brought that up. Their argument is saying, look, only 30-something% of rapes are reported. That's a figure that I've heard, and we don't want to create more pain for women who have been raped. Now, we all agree that we don't want women who have been raped. It's a horrible experience, and we want to do everything we can to help them. But I think that this is not the right way to do that, and I'm hopeful that, as Chris said, we're going to move forward on that bill, and then we will have done two very important pro-life bills early on in this Congress.
This other bill that was passed today would ban federal funding of abortion. Now, yes. I ran into a friend of mine who's a Democratic pundit earlier today, and she said, look at this, they're just redoing what they've done before. The Hyde Act is in place. Why do you need another bill doing what federal law already says you can't
Raymond,
do?
Is the most disingenuous argument these days. The Obamacare exchanges and all of the health care, the money coming directly from the federal government to pay tax credits in order to buy these plans, I mean, that isn't public money, I don't know what is, goes to the Obamacare exchanges, to these insurance companies to buy these plans that include abortion. The Hyde Amendment is under the Health and Human Services Appropriations Bill. The Obamacare, it doesn't apply to Obamacare.
From it.
It was authorized and appropriated separately, completely distinct from the Health and Human Service Appropriation. So there's no connection, none whatsoever. President Obama, in my opinion, lied when he said that the Hyde Amendment will apply, he did it in the executive order, will apply to the Obamacare exchanges. Because we have people making statements like you just said, a person told you earlier today, we went to the General Accountability Office and they said over 1,036 Obamacare plans pay for abortion on demand, completely contrary to his word to the House in September of 2009 when he said that wouldn't be the case, and then later on in the executive order.
Congressman Lipinski, does this cure that difficulty and that funding of abortion in Obamacare? Is it over as a result of this bill? Well, assuming it gets to the Senate and is signed by the President, which is a long shot.
Yes, it would do that. We went through this whole battle. I was very much in the middle of that with the Stupak amendment that we were able to get on to Obamacare in the House. That bill wound up not being the one that passed, so I oppose that. So it is really no one could even claim right now that there isn't taxpayer money going to fund insurance plans that cover abortion. Even the fig leaf that they put on, where they were going to separate taxpayer dollars from paying for abortions. The study Chris mentioned said they're not even doing that. They're not even, doing what they were supposed to do for that so-called separation. So clearly, there is money going to fund abortion, and the Hyde Amendment has to be renewed every year. This would make sure that would not have to be done.
I want to play something for you.
But again, what's new, Raymond, is that Obamacare, we would take abortion out of it. The bill we've sponsored with many other co-sponsors takes abortion out of the Obamacare exchanges. So there won't be 1,036. There will be zero that are paying for abortion.
I want to play this for you. Judge Andrew Napolitano was on the show a few weeks ago. He wrote an op-ed not long ago saying neither party really cares about this issue enough to get a law that is actually passed. Listen to what he says and reflect on this from both of your perspectives. Roll it.
Ronald Reagan was president and had control, and the Republicans controlled the Congress. When George W. Bush was president, the Republicans controlled the Congress. A simple one-line statute would have undone abortion at its core. The fetus in the womb shall be considered for all legal purposes to be a person. Did we see such legislation signed? No. Did we see such legislation debated? No. Did we see such legislation offered?
No.
So how faithful are the Republicans to the pro-life cause, or is it just a mechanism to please some of their base?
I'll let each of you react.
I love the judge, but he's absolutely wrong. There have always been complications in the Senate. Now we have a 60-vote rule. During the Reagan years, both the House and the Senate were controlled by the Democrats, and I mean, there's always been a problem with one body, the Senate or the House, and then for 8 years, long years under Bill Clinton, and now 8 long years will be under Obama, you have the veto pen, and even our bill will face a certain veto. God willing, we get a pro-life president next time who can sign this legislation. But we've tried. The personhood amendment, Jesse Helms, when I first came into town, was an effort to try to establish the personhood of unborn children. But getting those votes is very, very hard because, again, the Senate, the filibuster rules, I mean, it's not as easy as some people think. It really isn't.
Well, it seems to me, and if you look at these other movements that have really thrived, whether it's the civil rights movement in the 60s, the gay rights movement, it is the culture that was changed. It was the culture that shifted, and then legislation followed. Is that the problem here? That it's starting on Capitol Hill rather than out in the culture?
Well, the culture is changing, though, and we certainly see that, and I think so many people don't understand how the millennials, the young people, how pro-life they are. And I think that's something that the March for Life really, hopefully, wakes some more people up to that fact. And we have to, you know, we could debate if there's been too much timidity in pushing pro-life legislation forward, but we have to do what we can do. And politically, I think we are making the progress that we can make. I'd always like to see more, push it a little more, but I don't think we can be critical of what has not been done.
And can I just add an excellent point? The Marist poll, commissioned by the Knights of Columbus, found that 70% of the millennials are against taxpayer funding for abortion. When you look at the breakouts in that poll, the culture is shifting. We have a mainstream media that is so aggressively pro-abortion that tries to mute any gain, any thought in legislation, put a twist on it that's always in favor of the other side. And we have yet to have that national debate on abortion, which the pain-capable legislation will further put into the, you know, look at the methods of abortion, dismemberment, chemical poisoning, choice, and all the sophistry of choice, euphemisms that are thrown around, can't cloak that forever. And this movement is so filled with millennials, pro-life men and women. The church has done a magnificent job. Legislatures have passed over 200 laws in the last 2 years alone. We're making progress, and we have to just redouble our efforts, but we're going to win.
I want to talk for a moment about a story I saw in the Washington Post today. And to my eye, it is the hijacking of this March for Life that we saw today. For 42 years, this march has been going on, and there's a group today, their name is the Faith and Public Life Organization. This is really a George Soros group. They're pro-abortion, actually. But apparently they have gotten 100 Catholic leaders, 31 presidents of Catholic universities to sign a petition urging you, Congress, to pass immigration reform. And they say this is a pro-life issue. This week I've heard clerics, I've heard these public policy folks all trying to sort of wrap themselves in the mantle of the pro-life march, calling their pet project, whether it's poverty relief or this, immigration reform, a pro-life issue. Is that a problem? Does that dilute the message and the reason that these people come out on this day, on the 22nd of January?
I think a lot of people who make those types of statements are trying to dilute the pro-life movement in the importance of protecting the babies and protecting the mothers. They're trying to dilute that and get mixing in all these other issues. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do comprehensive immigration reform. We should do that, but we should not be mixing those together and in any way sort of, I think, lowering the importance. We shouldn't be lowering how important it is. We are talking directly about life and death here when we are talking about pro-life legislation.
Yeah, it's the primordial right, and I think people lose sight of that. They, you know, and no one's saying that health care isn't a life issue or immigration reform or these other things. The question is, when you have young people coming on this day for this event, on the Roe v. Wade commemoration, I'm sorry, this day is not about immigration reform.
Raymond, it really is all about demoting the heartfelt concerns and convictions of pro-life people that there is a child holocaust occurring that equally wounds every mother who gets an abortion. It's a different kind of wounding, mostly psychological. Father Pavone's outreach with Silent No More awareness, they know better than anyone how bad it is. Project Rachel in the Catholic Church, in other dioceses. Women are wounded by abortion, and they want to just get the attention always off. You know, again, every debate we have on the floor, I mean, Daniel and I work on human rights issues, whether it be religious freedom, human trafficking. They're all very important. But abortion is the only human rights abuse that masquerades as a human right. And groups like this deliberately try to muddy the waters so we don't see clearly the killing of the unborn and the wounding of their moms.
Before I let you go, I want to play one quick bite. This is the president from the State of the Union talking about abortion. Listen.
We still may not agree on a woman's right to choose, but surely we can agree it's a good thing that teen pregnancies and abortions are nearing all-time lows and that every woman should have access to the health care that she needs.
Do you agree with that? Is the abortion rate and teen pregnancy rate truly at an all-time low?
That would have to be fact-checked, you know, but I have to say this. For this president to suggest that under his watch and because of him, it's in lieu of all of his policies, despite it, notwithstanding, that the numbers have come down. It is because of the pro-life movement. It is because of the church. It is because of the growing pro-lifeness of people throughout this country, especially, as Daniel said, the millennials. We're seeing a sea change occurring. This president has used every means possible to expand it, even funding. You reduce the number of abortions by about 25% when money is not available from the government to subsidize it. The Hyde Amendment probably saved well over 1 million kids who are now walking in D.C. and everywhere else and living their lives out because Medicaid did not enable their demise. The president has no right, this president especially, the abortion president, who has done everything he can to expand it everywhere through funding. He has not protected conscience rights. He has violated conscience rights like no other president in history. I mean, he's got his legacy is the abortion president, so he can't boast that the numbers went down. They went down despite his efforts to expand it.
Congressman Lipinski, last word.
The good news has been what's going on in the states. The last 6 years, we have lost ground. Admittedly, on the federal level, but there is a lot of good news at states pro-life legislation. But I have to say, and I'm not defending the president, but for him to say it's a good thing that the number of abortions is going down, that admits to the fact that abortion is bad. And I hope that sort of that connection is made that, yes, we need to reduce the number of abortions. We are not hearing that enough. Coming out of this president.
Well, it is nice to see a bipartisan balance here on this issue because it is not a political issue and it defies and moves far beyond politics. It's a human issue. So it's great to see you both here.
Thank you.
Thank you both for coming. When we return, she runs the largest network of crisis pregnancy centers in the nation. She'll react to those papal comments about responsible parenting and more. Peggy Hartshorn joins us on the World Over Live special. Continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. It's been 42 years since the landmark Roe v. Wade decision legalized abortion on demand here in the United States. Now, polls show an electorate that is increasingly pro-life, or one that at least favors more restrictions on the procedure. Joining me now is a woman who's been trying to give women a fulsome choice. Her organization cares for women confronted with unplanned pregnancies and for their children. Please welcome the president of Heartbeat International, a network of crisis pregnancy centers across the nation, Peggy Hartshorn. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Raymond. Great to be here.
I want to start with these papal comments that the Pope made on the plane. They have caused a lot of controversy. I'll play them for everybody, and then I'd like your reaction and to hear what you're hearing from women whom I know, some of whom I know have large families. Roll that.
I think the number of 3 children per family that you mentioned is the one experts say is important to keep the population going. When it goes below this, the other extreme happens. The key word is the one the Church always uses all the time, and even I use it. It is responsible parenthood. The example I mentioned shortly before about that woman who was expecting her 8th child and had already had 7 who were born with cesareans. That is an irresponsibility. That woman might say, "No, but I trust in God." But God gives you methods to be responsible. Some think that, excuse me if I use the word, that in order to be good Catholics we have to be like rabbits. No, responsible parenthood.
What do you say to these mothers? I've been getting emails from them all week who say, wait a minute, I'm now an irresponsible parent because I have 7 children, 6 children, 8 children? You'd say what?
It's very difficult to understand that example, I think, and I think that was an unfortunate specific example to use. And to even pick out a specific example and say this is responsible or this is irresponsible, the Church has always discussed responsible parenthood.
Right.
In Humanae Vitae and in theology of the body. I think the 2 key terms that I love in Humanae Vitae are that these decisions have to be prudent, and perhaps the Pope was talking about a prudent decision, and the decision has to be generous, prudent and generous.
And between that couple and God.
Absolutely. And so to take a specific example, when we don't know, was he referring to the fact, maybe thinking the woman is putting her life in danger?
Well, he said that. You're tempting God. You're going to leave 7 orphans, he said. But the challenge, and again, I'm trying to reflect some of the emails I've gotten, and I've gotten hundreds over the last few days. Women keep saying, wait a minute here, there was a real woman that the Pope is pointing out, and I can't imagine being that woman as the mother of 6 children by cesarean section. I can really sympathize. I feel her pain, and I don't understand this at all. So I think it might have just been, it went a little too far, even though the context was he was clearly reaffirming church teaching on artificial contraception.
And the generosity. And actually, the opportunity, of course, comments like that hit the press, and it got great press, which gives us the opportunity to talk more about the Church's teaching, which he did in the same comments.
Yeah, but we don't need any more of them. Thanks a lot. Let's move on to what we're hearing today, what we saw today here in the streets of Washington. Hundreds of thousands of people, largely young people. It was
a beautiful march.
As part of this March for Life, the weather was glorious for the first time in I don't know how many years. It was pretty dreary in the last few years. Why is this, though, Peggy? And as I drove by and I saw all of these crowds moving, I thought, what we are looking at when compared to the civil rights marches of the 60s, the gay rights movement, this has to be the slowest moving civil rights movement of all time. 42 years with very little to commend it nationally speaking. Big pieces of legislation that sort of the cure-all.
Right.
It has eluded this movement. Why?
That's a difficult question, and I think there are a couple of things that come to my mind. One is that with abortions skyrocketing in the early years, even after Roe v. Wade, for over 40 years we have had massive numbers of abortions in this country, and that's a great deal of woundedness. And it's not just woundedness for the mothers that have had the abortions, it's the men, it's the siblings of aborted children, it's everyone. We now know that abortion changes almost everyone involved in that abortion, even those who took people to the abortion clinics, those who paid for the abortions. So when there's great woundedness, people have a blockage in even looking at this issue realistically and truthfully, because there's some personal There's something very personal about it. It's touched them or their families. I think that's one of the issues. I think the other thing is that abortion is really the linchpin of the whole contraceptive mentality. Because if we're promoting contraception, everyone should have a planned pregnancy. You know, the federal government keeps track of planned pregnancies and unplanned pregnancies. It's a major statistic. Major studies have been written about it. So if it's a great taboo to have an unplanned pregnancy and everyone needs to be using contraception, we know that contraceptives fail. And what happens if you've adopted the mentality that the worst thing in the world is to have an unplanned pregnancy? Then you've got to have abortion. So abortion has to be the linchpin. And it's the linchpin for the sexual revolution, which we still are buying into massively.
At the State of the Union earlier this week, you heard the president say it a little earlier, abortions, teen pregnancies are down, he says. Do you agree with that, seeing things from the grassroots level? It's
difficult to know because a lot of those statistics come from the Alan Guttmacher Institute, of course. And I question that because, first of all, California doesn't report any numbers. One of the biggest abortion states does not report numbers. We have the abortifacients, Ella, which the morning after pill may act as an abortifacient. Ella always does. So the numbers of unreported abortions are massive. So I can't say for sure.
You have over 1,000 affiliates across the nation and the world.
Actually, we're close to 2,000 now.
Wow, that large. Tell me, how many men and women do you serve annually, do you estimate? And if you could look back over these many years that you've run this, how many lives do you think you've saved?
Oh, that's such an amazing question. Well, we know that we're saving now about 3,000 babies a week whose mothers came to our centers and are abortion vulnerable. All right, so 3,000 babies a week, I think is about 156,000 1,000 babies saved a year. Take that over 40 years, pregnancy centers have been around. I think that's millions of babies saved. But you know what, Raymond? It's really amazing to me that when people talk about babies saved in pregnancy centers, we do count babies whose moms came in, were abortion-minded, abortion vulnerable, had an ultrasound, changed their minds. But you know what? We're saving a lot of babies through prevention programs. Because we're teaching sexual integrity. You know, we're saving people from having to make that abortion decision. In post-abortion programs, we are saving babies because people who are healed of abortions don't have additional abortions. And in family building programs, this is something I hope we're going to talk about too. Strengthening families means that there will be fewer abortions in the future.
I want to play one of those families that you've reached out to. This is Victoria Chan Pablo. She's one of your clients. Listen to this.
We were pregnant in the year 2000. Again, I was 15 and my husband was 18 at the time. In a panic, we did not know what to do. We were very young. I was only 15, still in high school. My then boyfriend, now husband, was also very young. He was 18. We were both still in high school. So the day that we found out, we researched pregnancy centers in the area in the hopes of getting some information on what our choices were and what we could do and just any type of information we could have. I'm not going to say that it was not rough having a child at 15. We worked full-time, we went to school full-time, we did it on our own. We lived on our own, we supported our daughter on our own. It was very hard, but you can do it. And because of clinics, because pregnancy clinics, because of counselors like Marsha, that give you their support and encouragement, you can do it. I just want to say that the pregnancy clinic saves lives. It truly saves lives.
Your reaction when you hear that?
Wow. I mean, it was so moving. I heard her give that testimony. It's so moving. And I just thank the Lord for raising up all of these pregnancy centers all over the country, all over the world, people who are saying yes to that call, who are giving of themselves. One of the things Victoria and her husband, actually, Christian, talked about was the pouring out of love from their volunteer at that pregnancy center. Not just during the pregnancy, after the baby was born as well. And you know, when they came to our Babies Go to Congress event yesterday, we had the whole family, the mother, the father, their daughter now that she was talking about about in that crisis pregnancy, who is now 14, and their 5-year-old daughter. They were all there together with us. And it was such a beautiful thing to see how the outpouring of love that they received helped them build a family. They saw that example. And the father said, without the pregnancy center, I would not be the father I am today.
Yet your critics say, and I've read this in the New York Post recently, they say you and these other crisis pregnancy centers are deceptive and manipulative toward these women. How would you answer them?
Well, one of the reasons they think we're deceptive is because we tell them the facts about abortion. I wish they were right that we were lying when we had to say that abortion is tremendously damaging to a woman emotionally and physically. There are links between abortion and breast cancer. These are the facts. You know, I wish it were true that we were lying about them, because then women would not be as harmed as they are today. But we are telling the truth. That's the reaction.
It's amazing work. Peggy Hartshorn.
Oh, thank you,
Thank you for coming in.
Great to be with you.
Heartbeat International can be found online at heartbeatinternational.org. And give us the number. There's a number of people are in crisis pregnancies.
Yes, we have optionline.org. Please look at optionline.org. Our 800 number is 1-800-712-HELP. 7 days a week, 12 months of the year, 1-800-712-HELP.
Peggy Hartshorn, thank you for being here. When we return, Dorinda Bordelea of the Bioethics Defense Fund will tell us why Louisiana is the nation's most pro-life state, and the laws moving through legislatures across the country. Very interesting. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay with us.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. For the 6th year in a row, Louisiana's been called the #1 pro-life state in the Union, according to Americans United for Faith. Joining me now is a native daughter, or United for Life. I'm reading things that aren't even there. Joining me now is a native daughter of Louisiana and one responsible for a number of laws designed to protect women and children. After premiering in Louisiana, some of these laws have been copied by other states. Please welcome the Vice President and Chief Counsel of the Bioethics Defense Fund, Dorinda Bordelea, via satellite from New Orleans. Oh, I wish I could be there with you, Dorinda.
Oh, I wish you could too. Come on down, Raymond.
Now listen, nationwide, the number of abortion clinics have contracted 25% over the last 5 years. Some 230 state bills have limited abortion. With that as background, why is Louisiana, do you think, the most pro-life state in the Union?
Well, you know, as a New Orleans native, we're just so proud that New Orleans has been, that Louisiana has been ranked #1 in life protective laws for the last 6 years running. And we have one of our home bases here in Louisiana, also in Arizona, who's ranked #4 this year. And we think it's because of the people of Louisiana, the big-hearted people of Louisiana who love life and who understand that life is about loving and being loved, not using and being used and casting people aside.
Tell me about this law that you helped draft that requires admitting privileges for abortion doctors at nearby hospitals. Now, this law, I know, is subject to a couple of lawsuits, so tell us how you think those will come down as well.
Well, I think that those will go well. The Louisiana abortion admitting privileges law was actually brought by the head of the Louisiana Black Caucus, a woman named Representative Katrina Jackson. And Representative Jackson, who is a Democrat, understands that abortion hurts women and that women who are pregnant deserve better options instead of the violence of abortion. And so we realized that while abortion is still legal, we don't want women to be harmed in the process. And so all this law does is to say, look, physicians in ambulatory surgical centers have to have hospital admitting privileges so that when there's complications, you can admit the patient. It's just a common standard of medicine. And so we're applying that same standard to abortion providers. Now, you would think that an industry that calls itself a women's health industry would not object to that. But they have objected. They've objected in Louisiana, in Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Wisconsin, everywhere. They're fighting to keep the standards low. And that just shows that they're not really interested in women's health. They're interested in selling abortion at a high profit margin where they can have physicians who are not up to par.
Dorinda, what's the most innovative bills that you see coming down the pike on the state level or nationally? I mean, there are some issues here that we are seeing a convergence of left and right on, the sex and reproductive trafficking and the like.
That's right. You know, sex trafficking is an issue that has grabbed the attention of the youth. And here in Louisiana and in many states, Governor Jindal has done things where women who are trafficked, again, you know, Roe v. Wade, by commodifying babies, ended up commodifying all human beings. And so women being sold, and a lot of times it's minors, then we'd be criminalizing the women. This new change is to criminalize the men that are using them and trafficking them, and getting help for these traffic victims by getting them points of rescue at the law enforcement stations. So a bill that we were asked to do by a Louisiana legislator was to help make abortion clinics points of rescue for sex trafficking victims as well, because we see a pattern of these women, of course, being sold on the streets, coerced many times, and then coerced into abortion clinics for abortions. And a lot of times they'll allow the woman to have one child, use that child as an anchor baby to threaten the girl that after a while she doesn't care if they hurt her, but they will threaten her baby. And so it's a horrendous situation, but it's bringing together left and right, organizations that care about women, organizations that are working with women in abortion and trafficking situation, and there's just all kinds of new alliances being formed.
Dorinda, we only have a few more minutes. Returning to Louisiana, there's been a real battle brewing over a Planned Parenthood super center, if you will. This is in the heart of New Orleans, near downtown. There is a slab in place, but little else. Now, I know the State Department of Health recently denied Planned Parenthood a license to perform abortions on that site. Tell me the role that the Archbishop played that has really slowed the building of this abortion supercenter.
Yeah, this is just another wonderful model for the nation. Archbishop Amond did what bishops should do, and that's to teach. And here's what he did. He put out a public letter, and he said, anyone, any contractor or construction worker that participates or collaborates in building an abortion clinic that kills unborn babies and harms women is doing something called cooperating with evil. And you see many people that were being contacted saying, you know, just pour the slab. Well, it's just, I'm just doing my job. He taught them about cooperation with evil, that if you are part of building an institution that you know will be a place where there is death and destruction, then you are part of that. And so when he put that letter out, he said, look, the Archdiocese has many building projects of our own, and we would find it very difficult to do business with contractors who are participating in this grave evil of abortion. And so all of a sudden, there's no one wanting to participate. And so there's not even a slab. There is a wooden form. Wow. And there's no concrete because they can't find a concrete contractor. And it's because, again, just like the women and the youth and all of the people marching for the 42nd year in Washington, D.C., these contractors realize that abortion hurts women. It's not health care. It's a desperate situation for women that thinks that there are no other choices. And so we hope that that place will be replaced with a health center that provides real options for women and real pregnancy services and real aftercare and parenting health care that really helps women and families.
Dorinda Bordley, before I let you go, what encouraging signs do you see at the High Court, at the Supreme Court? And I don't see too many, but I think you do, so tell me what they might be.
Well, you know, just this past year, there was a 9-0 opinion upholding the right of sidewalk counselors. And what these people do is simply offer women choices. You know, they say, do you need some help? Can we help you with health care? Or do you need a car? Do you need a ride, some groceries? And there are people in Massachusetts that are trying to keep them away from talking to the women, actually setting up a whole zone where you can't approach women. And the Supreme Court, by a 9-0 decision in the McCullen case, said that free speech applies and that if people want to help other people, that they should be able to do that. And so speech is alive and well. And that is something that we can't overlook, because more and more people will try to silence people with values that respect human life. And we have to be able to speak to spread the truth, because the truth is actually what's going to convince people as we go.
Dorinda Bordeley, thank you so much for being here, and tell everybody in NOLA I said hi. For more information on the Bioethics Defense Fund, visit bdfund.org. My next guest is a neuroscientist, one of the foremost experts in the world on bioethics. He joins us tonight to reflect on this March for Life and some breaking stories. Welcome back to the program, the Director of Education at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, Father TAD PACHOLCZYK. Father TAD, thanks for returning.
Great to be with you.
Let's talk for a moment about what is moving people to this pro-life position. We are seeing people, I saw some today on this march, people who told me they could never have imagined themselves taking part in a march like this, or even holding the belief they now have toward this issue of life.
Well, I certainly think one of the things is that we are more effectively addressing people's fears. I'm convinced that a lot of abortion happens because people feel they have no other options. So my heroes are the Crisis Pregnancy Center people. They're there, the people who are on the sidewalks reaching out to these women. I think that's a major piece that is shifting individuals to a pro-life position. I would say also, it seems to me that we're sort of pushing back against the sexual revolution a little bit. And we need to do that because there's such a tight connection between abortion and the sexual revolution. I remember there was this gathering that Dale Vree had many years ago. He had 6 pro-lifers, he had 6 pro-choicers, and there was 2 undecideds. They got together, they were going to have this big discussion. He thought it was going to be all about when does life begin. It ended up that one of them, after they went back and forth a little bit on that, blurted out, "We're pro-sex and you're anti-sex." And he took that to mean, well, that those who oppose abortion believe that sex should only be within marriage, heterosexual marriage. Meanwhile, pro-abortion advocates often believe in sex in many different forms. So I think this connection, as we educate people about the teachings of the Church, about ordered sexuality, it reins in the temptation. And it changes their viewpoint. You know, when they realize that sexuality has an order to it, then abortion becomes a real problem for them.
You mentioned teaching. I'm going to return to these rabbit comments of the Pope. These have been, my emails have been just overloaded this week, and voicemails about this issue. Many, particularly women, took real umbrage at these comments, particularly this notion that the woman having 7 cesareans was tempting God. And is it just the media? I've had people say, well, this is just the media. It's a media spin.
It's hard to say. I think the media does look for real sound bites that will, you know, carry well.
Yeah, but they're not making this up. These are actually the sound bites.
It's true, but if you look at the fact, for example, that the Pope at his Wednesday audience today went over some more of this, they were saying it was a rabbit reframe. So, you know, there's an attempt here to kind of clarify. I think he was trying to be a little bit provocative here. Now, you know, let me just say something about rabbits. I mean, rabbits are what we call reflex ovulators. So when they copulate, they release an egg, and they become pregnant almost immediately. This is not the case for humans. 1 egg each month. And we have a space where humans are infertile. And so, in a sense, the rabbit comment can be turned properly to point out that difference and to say, look, humans can choose responsible parenthood. You know, when there are serious reasons to avoid a pregnancy, God has given us this beautiful cycle which allows us to time things in a way that's in accord with His will.
Some of the major papers that I read this week covering this story said the Pope was advocating the rhythm method. That is not what he was advocating at all.
Well, I would say that he was advocating the rhythm method and, you know, any natural approach.
But the natural family planning approach is not really the rhythm method anymore. That's this antiquated thing.
Yes.
That is gone. What's replaced it is much more organic.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, it's not...
relies on far more
there are other indicators,
et cetera, and much more precise. It's become, you know, a refined science. So absolutely, in that sense, I didn't catch the drift of where you're going with that.
Sometimes
but
I'll lead you. It's okay. Tell me about how assisted reproduction and the rise of surrogacy that we're seeing across the culture, everywhere, how that has changed the understanding of this issue, or has it?
I think it has. I think what has happened is we've seen kind of the logical next step. If a child is a product that can be eliminated through abortion, then also the child should be a product that can be engendered when we want. We can hire other people to carry our children. We can create children in glassware in the lab. So there's a kind of, this fancy word, commodification, where it's no longer that the child is pure gift received mysteriously in the marital embrace. Rather, the child is a product now, something that if I want, I can have. If I don't want, I can turn away. So it ties in. I think the move in reproductive medicine has really tied in very closely with the whole pro-abortion mentality. And I think there's a need to, in a sense, push back here and remind people of things like you shouldn't be producing embryos, you shouldn't be freezing embryos in the laboratory. This is another form of abortion as you do this as well. When you create young human beings, there's a 50% loss of those embryos when you freeze and thaw them, you know, exposing them to terrible risks, etc. So to kind of unite the whole continuum, we need to do that, starting with some of these very, very early time points, including stem cell research.
I want to run through some very quick things that I've picked up in the last couple of days. I overheard a press conference. Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader, was speaking, and she said, look, I know more about childbirth than the Pope does, okay? I've had 5 kids in 6 years. And she made the statement that abortion is really a decision between the woman, her body, her conscience, and her God. You would say what to her?
Well, I mean, the claim that it's, first of all, I mean, there's the common claim that it's her body.
Right.
And this is a decision about her body. And I think it was Kathy Ireland, the supermodel. She said, look, there's a 50% chance that your baby will be a male and have a penis. And that women don't have penises. So it's clear that this is not your body. This is rather the case where your body is carrying another individual. So it's a very kind of simple rebuttal to that soundbite. Oh, it's all my body.
What about this notion of I'm personally opposed? You hear this on Capitol Hill all the time. Look, I go to Mass every weekend. I'm personally opposed, but I got to live out. I can't impose my beliefs on others.
Right. Well, you know, that particular argument, if you remember...
The Mario Cuomo argument.
Right, but also, yeah, if you think back to another event that happened not that long ago, the George Tiller killing in Kansas of the abortionist. There was somebody who shot him. And then there were commentators afterwards who were saying, well, if you don't want to kill abortionists, then you don't have to kill abortionists, kind of thing. So, in other words, they were flipping the logic around.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's kind of grisly.
It is grisly, but I mean, I think that to hold to the logic here, we've got to, affirm the value of life, not just of an abortionist, but clearly across the whole continuum.
Give me your sense of the tensions that you see, the conflicts in this pro-life movement. The problem with a march like this is it kind of, I think, glosses over some of these things that are more apparent during the rest of the year. On a day like this, when you see the banners and all the young kids getting out of school buses, it's a different feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's encouraging in one sense to see so many people who are here, who are marching, who are convicted about the need to protect human life. And yet at the same time, being, as it is for me, working in a very pro-life institution, when we talk about collaborating among different pro-life groups, I feel like there's a lack of unity sometimes. There are some people who want to claim certain areas of territory, maybe as their own. So I think we need to build a real unity, especially among those of us who are most in the trenches, and to reach out and build bridges more than we have. You know, disunity, it's the sign, it's the work of the devil. And I think he seeks to separate even pro-lifers and make them not work well together. But a march like this really is a sign of hope, I think.
Well, what should people be doing in the public square? What isn't being done today? I mean, the danger is people show up for the march and then they go home and they don't say anything for another year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to win some of the soundbite arguments. I think we have to continue to humanize the embryo. So I think things like the ultrasounds are incredibly valuable in just saying to people, here's what we're actually dealing with. I think we have to do some things like reclaim higher education. I think when, I always tell the story of a young fellow who I know who just recently went to college, went to his class, and his professor said to him, well, I assume that all of you are pro-choice. It was as if it was a foregone conclusion. This is the only intellectually acceptable position, is to be pro-choice. And so I think we need to get some, professors who are pro-life into the academic setting. We don't have enough of that. So it's a very muted presence. Thanks be to God for those who we do have, like Marianne Glendon and others, who really give great witness where they are.
Father Tad PACHOLCZYK, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you,
and
Raymond.
We'll see you again soon. For more on Father Tad's work and for all his columns, you can visit the National Catholic Bioethics Center website. They're at ncbcenter.org. Now, before we go, the world over is seeking a new producer, someone with some broadcast TV experience, a detailed-oriented person who wants to have a real influence and help us cover the world as only we can. If you're interested in this DC-based position, send an email to EWTN Human Resources at humanresources@EWTN.com. Perhaps you can be part of our growing team. Well, that's all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. I know some of you are already there. I've been sneaking over here watching. You can follow us on Twitter, like me on Facebook. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. And be sure to tune in next week for my exclusive interview with actor Kevin Costner and his latest passion project. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. We'll see you next time. Bye now.